Welcome and thank you for joining me here at Film Pro Productivity. Each week I'll be introducing concepts that film professionals and other creatives can use to make life easier and avoid creative burnout. I'll also present time management and lifestyle hacks for a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 15, Planning Your Future by Setting Goals. In this, the final episode of Season 1, I will be talking about one of the most powerful weapons in the productivity world, and that is goal setting. Before I go into that though, last week's episode introduced 5 free productivity apps which I do encourage you to try. And I chose to highlight 5, but I could probably have found 25 if I'd put my mind to it. For every great productivity app though, there are 100 more that will steal away your time and slow you down and distract you. And even with productivity apps, sometimes you can get too much of a good thing. One of the very best productivity tips that I can offer is to switch your phone off every now and again. Try and form the habit, and you can listen to episode 13 for advice on that one, but try and form the habit of restricting your phone use for an hour before you go to your bed and an hour after you wake up, perhaps. The American motivational speaker Daymond John believes that the last thing you read at night will likely manifest itself when you're sleeping, and you become what you think about the most, he says. So take a bit of time out to relax and enjoy life while you can, and avoid the phone at night. If you banish the phone from your bedroom, in fact, you will also sleep a little bit better as a result. It will allow you to focus on the things that you should be doing instead of checking Facebook or Twitter or opening up your work email. If you use the phone as an alarm, as I often do, putting it in another room will also give you very good reason to get out of bed sharpish the next morning. Now, with Season 2 coming up soon, I'm very interested in including your thoughts and comments within it. I'd love to hear what productivity techniques that you've been adopting or what matters that you're having trouble with out there. You can send me your thoughts via the contact page at filmproproductivity.com or by catching me on Twitter at filmproprodpod. Earl Nightingale says that people with goals succeed because they know where they're going. When I first set out to create this podcast, and I know I've referred to it before, but I failed. I just didn't get it done. And I would say that I failed because I was unspecific and uncertain of what I really wanted to do. More recently, though, I dusted myself down and tried again, and I did a few things differently. The first thing that was different was that I knew exactly what sort of podcast I wanted to make. And secondly, I gave myself a deadline, which was a real hard taskmaster. Having a deadline that you know is looming ever closer really puts a rocket up your backside when it comes to drive. The next thing I did that was different was that, armed with the confidence that comes with knowing exactly what I'm doing, I created a tactical action plan to achieve it, and I stuck to it. Now, this was a complex and multifaceted plan, but I took it one bit at a time and I finally made it. This endeavour, this podcast, has not been easy at all. It's been far more costly than I'd thought possible. The learning curve has been sharper than I'd imagined, and it's taken far more time too. Researching and recording a single episode didn't just take the few hours that I had imagined it would. It takes days. But I did it anyway, and sometimes I did it again when I still wasn't happy. This podcast has been a vastly time-consuming thing for me, but that, I suppose, brings me to the main reason that I think I have succeeded. I've succeeded, well, because I want to. Because I absolutely believe that it will help other creatives, filmmakers and film professionals to get more done and move toward a better, happier life. And that gives me great satisfaction. The world-renowned motivational speaker and life coach Tony Robbins says that setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. I've found that deciding on my goals can be quite difficult, but I also recognise that when I have a goal, I can generally achieve it with a bit of effort. I think what I've learned is that the goal is like the carrot that leads me on, but that I need to learn to enjoy the process of getting there perhaps a little bit more. Another problem that I face is that if I'm not careful, I could chase too many goals at once, and as I said at the start of the multitasking episode, he who chases many rabbits catches none, so that's a non-starter. If you're having this problem of uncertainty in your goals, then in the quiet moments that you find over the next few days and weeks, take time to consider your greater life goals and write them down. You could actually write everything down in a brain dump and then denote 1, 3, 5, 10 and 20 year tags to them. From that then, you can find the ones that you're most passionate about and cut them down to 3 in each category. At least by that stage, you'll have a better idea of what you really want to do with your life. The chances are that some of your lesser goals, the ones that don't take as many years to complete, will be aligned with your greater long-term goals, and the list will get easier to focus in on and narrow down as a result of that. If you can work with that list, or you already know where you are heading with your larger life goals, then all you need to do is dedicate your time and your thoughts and your passion to reach them. Just don't forget to live your life and enjoy the journey along the way. Getting there won't always be easy, of course, but as Booker T. Washington said, you can measure the size of the accomplishment by the obstacles that you have to overcome to reach your goals. So things could get tough, but goal setting will allow you to navigate in the right direction and provide you with a benchmark for determining whether you are actually getting there or not. You may want to listen to this episode again sometime with a pen in hand if you're driving or whatever. I mean, have you actually thought about what you want to be doing in 5 or 10 or 20 years' time? Are you even clear about what your main objective is at work at the moment, or in the next project that you want to drive forward with? Do you know what you want to have achieved even by the end of the day? With New Year just around the corner and a whole load of productivity lessons behind us, I figured that this would be the ideal time to delve into this topic, and so I've left it till now as it's such a vital part of the productivity landscape. Goals are essential, and whether they are large or small, daily, weekly, hourly, or for life, without them, we tend to meander along and settle for where we are. That's a productivity nightmare, so listen up. This stuff is important. Elon Musk says if something is important enough, even if the odds are against you, you should still do it. So make sure that when you set your goals for yourself, that they motivate you, that they're important to you, and that they have some value to you in achieving them. If you've got no interest in the outcome, then the chances of you putting in the work is very low. I covered the SMART system to some extent in episode 11, the 12-week year, but let's look a little bit closer at it. It's probably the main system used to set and achieve goals, and so it's something that I just have to go into here. SMART is an acronym, which is also known as the 5 Golden Rules of Goal Setting, and SMART translates to specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. I'll break that down. By specific, we of course mean that your goals must be clear and well defined. Without a precise direction to travel in, you'll get lost trying to pin down your vague, unspecific and ever-changing goals, and that will simply mislead you and short-circuit your endeavours. By defining precisely where you want to end up, you have a much more realistic chance of getting there. An example of a specific goal might be to write a first draft of a new film by a date exactly 6 weeks from today. That particular goal could of course be part of a larger specific life goal for a screenwriter. Next, your goals must be measurable. Unless you are precise about each element of the goal and include dates, potential costs, etc., then you will find it difficult to measure the degree of your success. If your goal is simply defined as to lose weight, then how are you going to know when you've been successful? It's also worth saying that without a way to measure your success, you miss out on the opportunity to celebrate it. The letter A denotes that you must also set attainable goals. I don't really have an issue with this. All I'd like to add, though, is that attainable does not necessarily mean small. Although you can certainly aim small and achieve little wins, the larger life goals that I encourage you to consider should also make you want to raise the bar and aim for greatness. As Eminem says, Everybody has goals, aspirations or whatever, and everybody has been at a point in their life where nobody believed in them. That doesn't mean, of course, that you shouldn't try. Take a leaf out of James Cameron's book instead. He said that if you set goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. You may also consider starting small and moving up. The writer Michael Korda says that one way to keep momentum going is to have constantly greater goals. Perhaps thinking tactically like that will be useful to you, but I'll talk tactics a little bit later on. Your goals should also be the letter R for relevant to the direction you want your life and career to take. I used this Peter Drucker quote in a previous episode, but it's very relevant here. He said that nothing is less productive than to make more efficient what should not be done at all. You simply can't allow yourself to get distracted by the unimportant. You must engage your higher level thinking and narrow down your focus. If you don't, you will waste your time and mental energy on the irrelevant, and that is the opposite of productive. Be aware and follow the advice of Bruce Lee, who said that the successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. Finally, with the letter T, your goals must also be time-bound. So set a deadline for the specific goal for next week, in 3 weeks, in 3 months, 6 months. Setting an end point for your goal gives you a clear target to achieve. Make your timeframes realistic, but don't let them be too flabby, and push yourself a little. When you're working on a deadline, as I mentioned previously in regard to this podcast, it adds a sense of urgency, and that in turn gives you drive. So that was smart. But what else should we consider when we're setting and achieving goals? Let me start by urging you to write your goals down. I keep making this point on the podcast, but writing things down makes it 80% more likely that you will actually do them. The website mindtools.com makes the point as follows. The physical act of writing down a goal makes it real and tangible. You've got no excuse for forgetting it. And as you write, they also tell you to use the word will instead of would like to or might. For example, I will produce the pilot episode of my next series by the 1st of February next year. Not I would like to produce the pilot episode, or I might produce the pilot episode of my next series by the 1st of February next year. The first statement, you see, has power, and you can actually see yourself shooting that episode. The second, though, lacks passion and sounds like an excuse, and you can use it to get yourself sidetracked. That website also suggests that when you write yourself a to-do list, that it should have your goals written at the top of it. Now, you can do that in the Todoist app that I mentioned last week, by the way. You can create titles for each list, and they can just be your goals. So, let's talk now about strategy. I'm a great believer in making large projects a sum of their parts, and that system can work just as well for achieving goals. I suggest that you break your long-term goals into short-term tasks under smaller goal headings. For example, in this podcast, I knew that I wanted to create 15 episodes before I launched, and that was one complex sub-goal, but I also knew that I wanted a website that offered certain things and could expand later, and that was another complex sub-goal. The third, I suppose, was that I knew absolutely nothing about podcasting, so I had to go and learn all about it. And I never really thought about this podcast as being one huge, overwhelming task, only as 3 lesser ones that I dealt with day to day. My specific action plan for this podcast was constructed as follows. I made meticulous to-do lists for each step within each sub-goal which I had to complete in order to be successful in my main goal. Breaking the large, long-term goal into smaller, more manageable chunks just makes everything feel more real and achievable. Stephen Covey says that goals are pure fantasy unless you have a specific plan to achieve them. And with large goals, you simply have to create detailed, specific action plans. It's not something you should be scared of. If something is still tricky, then you just break it down into smaller and smaller chunks and start building from there. I'll end the lesson part of today's show by suggesting that you build in reminders to keep yourself on track. and make regular check-ins to review your goals. Put them in your diary. I have them in my Google Calendar app and they pop up every 6 months as a reminder. That said though, I'm always aware of them as I have my foot on the gas and I'm pretty focused on all this at the moment. By the way, sometimes, perhaps through changes in circumstance, you may alter your long-term goals along the way, and that's perfectly fine. Just be sure to redefine the new goals and keep on moving. My goals changed quite recently as, sadly, I lost my mum and my dad last year, and I realised that I wanted to live my life a little bit differently. I created this podcast in the spirit of my new hopes and dreams, and although my new direction is still close to the original, it makes much more room for me to give more back, and to be positive, and to push good vibes out into the world. I hope this episode has been helpful because without goals you will undoubtedly lack focus and direction. You don't have to move mountains or reinvent the wheel. Fitness expert and TV host Kiana Tom says that her personal goals are to be happy, healthy, and to be surrounded by loved ones. And I think that's as good a goal as any that I've heard. Jim Rohn says that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and that's relevant to much of what I've covered here. I'll finish up though with the words of C.S. Lewis, who points out that you are never too old to set a new goal or dream a new dream. Having goals is for everyone. It's not just a game for the young. For my own part, in whatever path you take and whatever goal you set out to conquer, I wish you well. So, this is the end of Series 1. I encourage you to look back over the previous episodes and see if there's anything that you missed. This season has been kind of structured to help those that are feeling overwhelmed in their life and work, and much of it has been aimed at stemming the flow of lost time and energy. In episode 1, I introduced the concept of high-level thinking and the principle of working on your life and career at the same time that you find yourself living and working in it. By now, I hope that this concept has had a bit of an impact on you and that you have been able to, at least in part, take back control of your life. In Season 2, I will continue to introduce even more productivity topics, and I've got a good idea of where I'm heading with it, but I'd love to include your thoughts and comments within it. So if you want to help, please let me know what you're struggling with by leaving a short voicemail message on the SpeakPipe recorder on the filmproproductivity.com contact page. You can also send a written message there, but if you leave a voicemail, I may include it in a future episode. I feel that before I go, I should explain perhaps why I've chosen the seasonal format here. The fact is that in order for me to avoid my own overwhelm and to allow me to go and shoot my own new creative projects, I just can't commit to delivering an episode of this show every week of the year. And it's a choice I made before I started. My spare time, my days off between paid fight contracts or on the stolen hours on shoot days when I find myself hanging about waiting to be called to set, when I'm not writing risk assessments that is currently dedicated to researching and writing these episodes. I now have to commit these lumps of spare time to a different creative project. And if I did say yes to releasing a new episode every week, I'd be saying no to many other opportunities. But don't worry, I will be back. I will return in just a few months with 12 new episodes. Now, if you would like to support this podcast, then please buy from one of my Amazon affiliate links listed in the filmproproductivity.com show notes. I think that the way this works is that you don't actually have to buy what I suggest, but if you go to Amazon through my links and buy really anything at all, I get some sort of supportive bump for directing you there. You can also hit me up by using the donate button on the website too. It's at the bottom of each page. Really, just as important though, I'd like you to keep telling people that this podcast exists. Keep leaving awesome reviews and generally just spread the word. Knowing that this podcast is helping people is perhaps the greatest reward of all. For now though, take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting. And join me next season on Film Pro Productivity. The music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Ehumitsu. You can read the show notes of this episode on the official website at filmproproductivity.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at FilmProProdPod or join us on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. Finally, I'd like to thank fellow podcaster Stephen Rowan of The Stephen Rowan Show, who produced the first 2 episodes, for his knowledge and advice in guiding me to a better podcast. I'd also like to thank the Dave Bullis Podcast, Podcraft, School of Podcasting, the No Film School Podcast, the Filmmakers Podcast, and Indie Film Hustle for the inspiration. Thanks for supporting the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.